Alright, good evening and welcome back everyone. Time for another chess video. I recently did my round 1 game from the Kyoto Gion Open and today I'm going to do the round 2 game. I really enjoyed making the video and I'm going to make a video for all of the rounds, so if you like it, please follow along. If you have anything you want to change, please share. I've appreciated all the views and the subscriptions and the likes and the comments and specifically the feedback up to now, so please go ahead. I'm trying to make something that I can enjoy but also that others can enjoy as well. Alright, and also just for anyone who didn't follow along in the first video, the Kyoto Gion Open did happen here in Kyoto. It's currently autumn, it's beautiful there, it's also full of tourists, both domestic and international, but our location was really nice, the venue was big and close to the Gion Park, but it wasn't actually right inside it, so we got to have a little bit of privacy, but also very easy access to some great walks during the day if you wanted to take a break in between your games. Alright, so after losing my first round game against a lovely lady from Taiwan, I'm not trying to get my headset, trying to dust off the chess thinking, get the gears rolling, and get my first point on the board for round 2. I'm facing someone called Kanehara-san. Kanehara-san is someone from Tokyo. He is a local here in Japan, and we have faced each other in the past. I believe we had the same colors. I think I was black, and I do think I won that game as well. So expectations for me to be able to put my first point on the board for this tournament. All right, no specific prep, I think, from either one of us. In these tournaments, I think some players prep, but a lot of us just go on, what we know about the opponent from the past and just see what happens when we get to the board. So, speaking of getting to the board, Kanehara-san opened with e4. I played c5. I'm looking to play a Sicilian. And now he can either play knight f3, which would be hopefully going to the open Sicilian, because I am kind of feeling like playing a Sveshnikov if the title didn't give it away on the side there. Or he can play knight c3, which would lead into a closed Sicilian. There are other options as well, but these would be kind of the main two moves that I would expect at this point. He does play knight f3. I'm liking this. I nod along, I go along, knight c6, let's do it. And then he plays knight c3, and now I'm not so sure. So which is it then, Kanehara-san? What are you trying to play here with me? I don't understand. And so at this point, I could play g6 or e6 or d6, or there's various. I can play e5. There's many ways I can play this position. But I have my heart set on playing a Sveshnikov. So what I decided to do is to play a6 because there's a version of the Sicilian called the O'Kelly which can help you transpose back into the Sveshnikov in a favorable position. And I just realized, for anyone who doesn't know what the Sveshnikov is that I keep talking about. And in this position, if you play d4 as white, this would be the open Sicilian. And in this case, there are multiple ways for black to play, but this is one version which I kind of enjoy. This is known as the Sveshnikov. And then white puts pressure on this d6 square. They're looking to jump their knight there and force me to take it with my bishop, and then they take with their queen, and my position is just horrible. So black has to push their pawn, block in their dark square bishop, open up their light square bishop, and this is really where you get into the Sveshnikov. However, now with knight c3 on the board, things are a bit different. So I'm hoping I can maybe transpose back to that previous position I just showed you. So a6, white does go with d4, so great, we're opening it up. I like it, I like it. I decide to swap the move order slightly and play e5 first. I just want white to put that knight somewhere so I know this is what they're doing, instead of putting my knight out and potentially them changing the opening again. So this just felt like a more solid way for me to get to the position I wanted on the board. Now I bring up my knight, and white brings out their light square bishop. And at this point I realized that a few moves down the line, because we're not opening up the game in the right way, at least not the move order that would make the real Sveshnikov happen, I'm not going to be able to continue the way I want to when the opening stage kind of comes to a close. Which is unfortunate because that means that although I've not tried to force this opening in the last 3-4 moves, I shouldn't have done that. Mistakes were made. Alright, so instead of playing bishop c4, which would be, or b4, which would be the continuation going into the Sveshnikov that I'm kind of looking at, I decided to just put my bishop on c5. it's a great square. It's got a real open diagonal to work with here, and if it gets pushed, it can fall back as well. And now I can play d6. I can pull my light square bishop out. I can castle, and I probably still have a game. So I don't feel like I have too much troubles going on. I castle. White inserts a3, which, I mean, at later points, maybe they want to push a b4, but they also maybe just want to stop me from being able to jump my knight or anything else onto that square. They're maybe just trying to limit my options. So here we go, continue my plan. And here I realize that white might not let me get away with my plan. So this pins my knight to my queen, which means that their knight can jump in here, double attack it. I have to retake with my pawn. Now my king's position is opening up. That is somewhat like a Sveshnikov, but this is not exactly the way I wanted to get there. Um, so I'm not so sure if things are going the way I wanted to. But I continue to finish the plan and finish my development. Here comes the knight as expected. And I didn't really think too long about this. I just took it. My thinking is that that knight cannot stay in this middle position. It's got such a good hold on my dark squares here. I need to develop my queen at some point still. And white is going to double my f-pawns, but at least I don't want them to double my f-pawns with a knight sitting over there. So just get rid of it. Thankfully also they have to retake with a pawn, so they don't get to put a piece on this square, so no knight or queen can come in here, keep it, and then cycle pieces. It's only a pawn, which means they only really get access to these two squares potentially, and they are currently covered by my own pawns as well, so not so dangerous, I feel. Alright, and then I decide I'll jump my knight back. There is an option here for me to jump my knight back this... Oh, apologies, rook's not involved. Jump my knight back this way, because then it can defend. But I'm not sure I want to put my knight here. I'm actually thinking that if I have to, I'm going to continue in this Sveshnikov-esque situation with the double f-pawns, because that actually gives you a chance to build up a kingside attack. So instead of trying to safely bring back my knight, defend the other knight, and avoid double pawns, I told white, go for it. I'm not afraid. I might be silly and potentially a little bit of an idiot, but not afraid. White says, thank you, I will double your pawns, and they do take the knight. I have to take back with the f-pawn. And so my plan is now going to be just to get my king out of the way, put my rook on the g-file, start pushing my pawns here in the middle, and just create some kind of attacking opportunity against the white king. Alright, so white first defends the d5 pawn, which I was attacking with my knight jump, obviously, so no big surprise there. And this is the first move in the game where I felt a bit uncomfortable after playing it. So my whole plan now was to push my f-pawns, and then after I've kind of blocked up this bishop, I want to move the king and bring the rook. But by moving the f-pawn first, I open up white's knight to jump to g5, which could live their queen to get to h5, which gives me a mate on h7, so very dangerous. I did find a continuation against this, but I'll show you in a second. But after I played f5, I realized that maybe things are not as good as I was hoping. f5 brings with it the threat of a fork against their two minor pieces, but mate is mate. You know, if I win a minor piece when I lose the game, that's still a lost game. Anyway, thankfully white also believed in my threat, and they first moved their bishop out of the way, and then I went, okay, let's get the king out of the way. And here, I once again thought, uh-oh, now they can jump in the knight, and then what? But after thinking, basically in white's time, they were also trying to consider which way they would play, I realized that I can do this. I can push the pawn, then they bring in the queen, so now the pawn is pinned, I can't take the knight, but the queen can take my pawn, so I push my king up. And although this feels very dangerous, I actually think black is holding here to some degree, because the queen and the knight are not coordinating, the light square bishop is out of the game, and currently white has no way to bring either of their rooks straight into this attack. So I will have a moment maybe to push e4 and then to jump my knight over, bring my queen in, make some plan, bring a rook over. I'll be okay, I'll survive. But white actually did not even decide to try that attack. They decided instead just to play the king over to the h-file themselves. So I think I had a slight mental advantage against my opponent this game. I had the feeling that they felt quite a lot of pressure, and although I didn't make the best moves for sure in many positions, I was trying to create some complications, trying to put some roadblocks and some pressure points in their mind, trying to give them to maybe lose a bit of confidence or trying to take a little bit extra time to make sure. And it did pay off by the end of the game. So I'm happy that that at least worked hard in terms of my strategies, if not the actual opening on the board. So here comes my rook. And white maybe slightly too fast also defend with a g3. I think they probably had a better move at this point still. Nothing wrong with it, but I don't think they needed to play that just yet. I bring my queen over. I'm just going ahead. I'm building a kingside attack. I have this open file. I have doubled pawns. I got to make something happen. If this game goes to the late game and we trade everything off, I'm not so sure I can win this anymore. All right. White also connects their rooks, so this is also a good thing to do always when you eventually get the rest of your pieces off of the back rank. And I decide to put my queen straight onto the g file. My thinking is now, if for some reason white doesn't put their rook on the g file as well, I can push f5 and they either have to take or push. If they take, it's mate immediately. If they push, I can still take the pawn, threaten mate, and in this way I can start to open up an attack against the king. So this g3 square, this g3 pawn push is also giving me a potential hook onto the pawns around their king. I can push f4, I can start to attack it, I can make something happen there potentially. Alright, so they don't push their knight over, they push their rook, they put their knight forward, not their rook. And this comes with a complication which I wasn't so excited about. That actually forces me to trade either a minor piece or to push the e pawn forward to try and block this bishop from having all this pressure on my f pawn, or I have to bring my queen up to defend the f pawn again because the f pawn is currently not going to survive for too long. I decided to push the e pawn because I had already been thinking about this for quite some time, that I wanted to blunt this light square bishop. I wanted to create less activity for white on this side of the board. However, I'm not so sure this was the greatest move because although the engine doesn't like it, white has a really nice move here, I thought. They have f3. And so the problem is now I would love to take this pawn. I would love to break open their kingside position more, but my knight is hanging on e7 and the queen is attacking that, so I can't take the pawn. I can push, but then they can close off the position and this pawn would still be hanging again because the light square bishop would have pressure on it and I would have to trade off another minor piece and potentially lose this e pawn that I had pushed forward as well at some point. I was not excited. Actually, my best move is to push f4. But I didn't see all of these continuations. So if, for instance, they take the pawn that way, I could have continued by breaking up the king structure this way. I'm also defending over here if they're trying to give me a mate. If they try to take with that pawn, then obviously I could jump over, I could attack the pawn and the knight at the same time. This is lovely for me. It also opens up the g-file for my rook. And if they tried to take that pawn first, I could have broken in with this. And in this way I could still break down their structure. So although I didn't see it at the time, f4 really did look like a fantastic move. Unfortunately, I only got to see this after the game. In the game, I couldn't quite figure out if f4 worked and I got a bit uncomfortable. And so instead what I played was just rook ae8. Bring my last rook into the game, defend my knight. What I'm also seeing here is that the rook and the queen are lined up, so if white starts to take all of my pawns here, I might have a chance to jump my knight somewhere and potentially get a free tempo on their queen at the right time. So, I moved over, white does go ahead, take my pawn, alright, fair enough. Hey, less pawns in front of your king, less defense, I hope. And here, I decide to kind of win myself a little tempo. I like moves like this. So, I bring my bishop up, and there's an idea I want to do, an idea that it looks like I want to do. What it looks like I want to do maybe is to take the b pawn. But that actually doesn't give me anything I want. I don't want the b pawn. I don't want to open up another file for white to attack on my side. What I actually want to do is I want to bring this bishop back onto one of these diagonals so it can be a little bit more active against the white king. I am clearly completely focused on a kingside attack here. So I'll draw the square again. I did this in the previous game as well. I was also doing a kingside attack in that game. And here again, you can see all my pieces are coming together on this side of the board. And although white is still perfectly fine, I'm hoping I can build some pressure and eventually break through. So I bring my bishop over. I'm pretending I might want to take the b pawn. I'm actually trying to just getting into a better diagonal. White does realize that they might be losing the pawn and they decide to get their rook out of the way and also maybe potentially help push it forward. But I'm really happy because I get to drop my bishop back. I still don't have a clear way of actually breaking through here, but I'm just trying to build some pressure, trying to get white to constantly see that there might be some potential threat. They also might feel a little bit uncomfortable and stay a little bit more passive while I try to figure out exactly how I'm going to break through here. So they bring their rook over to the g file, very defensive. I realize that I can't do anything on the g file, so I go to the f file because now actually I can push my other f pawn, my second f pawn that hasn't moved the entire game and is isolated. Currently that square is protected by both their minor pieces, but I'm trying to just get that up, break that again, and break the light square bishop's access again on this diagonal, and potentially from there I can either push it forward or I can try and bring my queen up a little bit more. I can make some kind of plan. It's not a 5-step winning plan, it's a 2-3-step putting pressure on my opponent plan. Alright, so I'm threatening that, and white finds a really nice move of their own, which has what looks like two potential reasons. The first one is, and two reasons on the same diagonal. They stop me from playing f5 because now they've got 3 defenders on that square and I will just lose the pawn. And they put pressure on my h-pawn. So they can potentially open up my king a little bit more. However, I'm attacking. Take all the pawns you want. I don't really mind. I'm trying to open up space, trying to get the position to allow me to get in there and put maximum pressure on my opponent. So having an additional pawn at this point, I'm not trying to win the endgame. What's more, after I moved my queen to g4, which very nicely gives me an additional defender of f5, which means I can again try and play that pawn up. Actually, this pawn is poisoned. So white does go ahead with the second reason that they had their queen and their bishop lined up on that diagonal. However, it actually walks into a problem, and it's not a hidden problem. I was planning to play f5 this entire time, so I do. But now the light square bishop is on the wrong side of the pawn. It's cut off. It's got no defense, and it's about to fall. What's more, I still have my 3 defenders of the f-pawn, and so if you take it back, you've just sacked your bishop for 2 of my pawns. And since I'm not trying to win the endgame here, more pieces for me, more pawns for you is a great trade. White realizes the mistake that they made, and they do decide to trade here. And after they trade, they bring their rook over. So now their pieces are also lining up on the king side. However, I've got an additional minor piece, and I'm within striking distance of white's king. I've got a bishop and a knight, and potentially a queen, that can hit on that g3 square. And I also have the option of taking the knight and doubling their pawns on the h-file. And so, as I was saying earlier, I had been playing slightly faster than my opponent, trying to build up the pressure and also build up a bit of a time advantage. And this is why I got to really dig in and use some of that. So I realized that I must be winning here at some point. The engine agrees. I am now completely winning. However, which continuation is best was something that I was struggling a little bit to figure out. So the one thing I don't like is that if this knight jumps down, it, well, not quite a royal fork, but pretty good. It forks my, apologies, it forks my king and a rook and a bishop, and I can't take it if my knight moves because I'd only have a queen attacking that square. I don't want to spend time moving my king up because that's just pointless. I'm here to attack. I can feel this is now, um, not to be crude, but oh, this is not a move I wanted to make at all. But this is one of those situations where you can smell the blood in the water. You know there must be something here, some way to make a killing blow. And so I took some time to also look at this, which turns out to be a pretty good continuation. There are obviously a few things to consider about this whole situation, but it's it's quite good. Overall, there's quite a few things here which are just fantastic for me. There are other ways that black could have taken back this one as well, but again, I can take there and then I can take here. I'll also just take here directly. It's just it's a good move for me. I think at this point, either jump with the knight works out well. I also have a potential fork here, but actually that's a mistake because then we run into that fork from white side. So I decided we don't have to complicate this. I'll take the knight, I'll double the pawns, I still have the extra dark square bishop, the minor piece, and white's two h pawns are doing nothing. So white decided to trade one of the rook pairs, totally fine with that. They take my knight, and I mean, this is great for me. Currently, White's king is just completely stuck in the corner. They still have some defenses, but I also have a light square bishop very nicely anchored. It can't get pushed away and is pointing straight at the king. So I don't have to have an immediate killing blow here because I know I can just convert this with a little bit of patience. I check, but in saying that, I don't want to trade queens. I want to try and find a way to maximize the discomfort, the tension, the pressure. Because if I trade queens at this point, sure, I'm still up a minor piece, but we both have some openings on this side of the board in our position. And so I don't want to suddenly find that white has a way to get their rook into my side of the board and I have to start playing defense. It's just going to continue the game far too long. I'm not a fan. So instead, I drop my queen back. I'm now threatening that pawn. I'm threatening this pawn. I'm also guarding against their queen coming in, which was kind of the main threat. And if worse comes to worse, I could still try and trade off a little bit later, and probably no big problem for me. So I pulled my queen back. White says, no, no, come on, let's trade. I really want to get this done. And I'm not a fan. So I try and take this pawn, get my queen out of the way, and just, I'm avoiding. I'm trying to play a little bit for time. I'm trying to find the right way to attack. And in this one move, white unfortunately blunders the game away and it's mate in one. So they were obviously looking at this, at which point they could obviously jump their king out, or they can still bring their rook back. Maybe the same after I bring my queen back. But they actually just hung the pawn straight in front of the king. And my dark square bishop, which had made a nice little return to a different diagonal in time, actually helps me land the killing blow. Something that I think might be worth mentioning at this point as well is when white played g6. So there's a chess streamer, an old man chess called Ben Feingold, and I watched a million of his videos when I was learning chess way at the start when COVID hit. It was a great time to discover chess. One of the things he says is be careful when you make someone else make their pieces move. Or at least something that he shows us a lot is he can predict the opponent's going to make one of his pieces move by attacking it, but he actually wants to move that piece because it's going to bring him some other opportunity. And so in the same way here, white's kind of trying to pressure me, trying to get us to trade queens, and I say no thank you. But in saying no thank you, I actually line up a mate in one. So although white thought that they had pushed my queen away, they had made me move, the move was actually something I wanted to make. And this is a space where a lot of people have a blind spot, and I myself have also made this mistake a lot of the time. So take this learning from my opponent's game this time, try to avoid it in your own games. Even if you make someone else move, it doesn't mean the move was a bad move at all. All right. And maybe just in terms of a theme for the game, don't try to play an opening by force. There are some system openings and some kind of very passive openings, so King's Indian Defense and London. These things you can play kind of regardless of what your opponent plays almost. But if you're playing something and you want to force it regardless of what's happening on the board, you're probably making suboptimal moves. You're not making kind of the moves that will really build your position the best versus what your opponent is playing. So don't be me, I guess, is the lesson in that case. All right, and that was round two. I had a fantastic tournament. I still have 4 rounds I'm hoping to share with you guys. This ended up being a B30 Sicilian Defense Old Sicilian, which is just very broad. It's not really a specific Sicilian. But it was a great time. Kanehara-san went on to win some of his own games. And finally, I got my first point on the board. So I'm 1 for 2 in my first day. And the rest of the tournament was pretty good. Up until I met my final boss in round 6. So I'll see you in the next video then. Good night.